What's going on? Headhunters, executive recruiter, search firm owners, and all around beautiful people. This is Headhunters Live, number 53, as you can see from the screen. And my name is David Stephen Patterson. And I've got right here my brothers from other mothers. Right over here, we have the best looking man in the biz, Chris Man.
Thank you, David.
Neil, you're welcome, Neil. So we have Neil Lebovitz, the actual real best looking man in the biz, and then Chris Wetzel, the flash in the pan handsome fella. Right here, I'm sorry, excuse me.
It's all hair product for him.
Neil threw me
and
off.
Teeth and chiseled jaw. Other than that, and dimples and thing in the chin. Other than that, and his gorgeous eyes. Other than that, it's nothing.
I'll tell you what, Neil has the cutest feet.
He's got the salt and pepper. He's got like a Sean Connery salt and pepper thing going on. Honestly.
Oh, that's right, Trebek.
By the way, I loved him with The Rock. Great. He had that one quote about the winners. What was it? Losers say they'll try. Winners go home and the prom queen. Remember that line? That's a great line.
Yeah.
I quote that all the time. Anyway,
that was a good one.
That said, we have a fantastic show today with a really cool recruiter. He's a young guy named Tyler Rossi. He's actually relatively new in the business. He has a really amazing story, and we're going to dive into that. Basically, how he got laid off from Indeed.com. He was an ad account guy or ad sales guy, and then he ended up becoming a recruiter, starting his own firm without any real prior agency experience. So we're going to be talking about that. Before we do so, for the folks who are watching now, please do me a favor and comment live, whether you're watching us on YouTube, LinkedIn, or one of our Facebook channels. Comment live so we know you're watching. And if you're watching the replay, please comment replay. What that does, a little inside baseball, it helps the algorithm and gets us to and expands our reach. So the more you do for us, the more we can do for you and bring you even keep bringing you great guests. Now, with that said, I do want to talk a few minutes about our sponsors before we bring Tyler on. So first off, let's talk about Boss, back office staffing solutions. So Neil right there is a little that shit-eating grin that he has right there. That's because that's his baby. He started back office staffing solutions a few years ago, and because he saw the issues with direct hire recruiters who are in that feast and famine mode all the time. You're billing big one month and then you're a goose egg in the next, and it's stressful. And if you want to get recurring revenue in your business and contract and staffing, that sort of thing, there's a lot of teeth to it. Workers' comp, all the insurance, funding, payroll is probably the biggest one. And the other services out there that do this don't really do that great of a job. They're either too expensive, they're not responsive, a host of issues. So Neil started Back Office Staffing Solutions, and it is a fantastic company. They take care of everything. It's one of the cheapest that you'll find out there. They're not expensive. They're not here to rip you off. They just want to provide a great service so you can flatten out your revenue and actually enjoy life instead of having to, again, go through that constant feast and famine. So,
and as a solo recruiter who is a customer of Boss, I can tell you they're super easy to work with. And I have, in the past with firms I've owned, I've used factoring companies. I've self-funded. This is so simple. It's a no-brainer.
Self-funding is the worst, man. I've done that too. It is, yeah. You can get,
I'll have some reserves. I'll self-fund. It'll work out great. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So with that said, go to backofficenow.com, and you can also check out one of his free trainings. It's called the Gross Margin Method. If you go to backofficenow.com/GMM. Now, for me, I actually have an AI challenge starting in just a couple of weeks. I did an AI challenge that was actually a really big challenge just a couple months ago. This challenge, however, is solely focused on client acquisition. 100%. So on day one, we're talking about content generation using AI. That's kind of like a small piece of the challenge. The majority of it is going to be, we'll be diving into a tool called clay.com. I know Clay is kind of the hot new thing right now with recruiters. We're going to do a big deep dive into Clay. Now you can use Clay to just radically transform your client acquisition and to do it with in a fraction of the time that you're doing it right now. So the doors open tomorrow. Go to realdsp.me/AI challenge. If you go there right now, there's a timer. Doors open tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Hey, let me ask you something on AI. Are you getting inundated on Facebook with all these targeted ads for recruiters? that are the latest in AI or no? I mean, I watch a lot.
I'm getting them. Yeah, I'm getting them
Oh,
for
I get
sure.
them all, and I also get if you're over 40 and you're not
No,
using
not if you're
10,000
over
tools.
40. Like I'm 61. It says if you're 61 years old and looking for hot women, right, or whatever. Like the AI stuff, it's just amazing what these people are selling, and just what they're able to do now when you pick the best out of them. It's crazy.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah. Well, we dive definitely really into that. We'll be diving into that in this challenge. It's gonna be a great challenge. So I suggest you guys sign up for it. Doors open tomorrow. Hey Neil, by the way, if you're seeing all those hot Russian babes dying to meet you ads, uh why are they targeting you like
am.
that?
It doesn't mean anything. My dad, who's 91, I went to his place and his computer was just inundated with sex pop-ups. I'm like, Dad, I got news for you. That doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah,
No,
because
it's
Neil was
not.
using the computer when he
He
was
turned
visiting.
beet red. But at 91, are you still taking care of personal business, you think?
You know what? I respect that. 91, he's going to other sites. I respect that. Go for it. He's earned it.
Me too. I can't imagine at 91 I have any desire, let alone knowing where my penis is.
All right. Well, that said, this show is going downhill quick. Let's bring on Tyler.
Run away, Tyler. Go away.
And that's the show,
All right.
everybody. Thank you for
He's still in
tuning
the green room.
Oh man, guys. All right. Tyler, I'm sorry, but welcome to the show.
What an intro. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Intro. All right. Well, Tyler, thank you for being here. Actually, okay, here's the thing. I've seen you around. You've been in the Facebook group, and we're friends on Facebook, and I'm seeing your stories pop up, which, to be honest with you, I see stories. I'm friends with a lot of recruiters, surprise. And I never, ever, 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 ever see any recruiters promoting their company through Facebook stories. Now, granted, I know you do a lot of other stuff, on LinkedIn, your podcast, all that kind of jazz, but it really caught my attention and it was really interesting. So I definitely want to talk about that. But the first one I want to talk about, though, was just kind of your story and how you got into the business, because it's really unique. So with that said, I guess let's go ahead and get right down to it. Tell us, I guess, to the audience, like a bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got into the business.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you hosting me, Chris. You were one of my first on my podcast. For everybody who's listening, go to the Recruiter of Steel podcast. That's what I'm hosting now. But prior to it was called the Let's Talk Talent podcast. Chris was very kind enough to come on, probably knowing idea who this young kid was in the business. So thank you for doing that, Chris. Appreciate you.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty good. A lot of people got value for that. But yeah, man. So I got started at Indeed.com, like we talked about. Came out of college, no idea what I wanted to do. Know a few people that were working at Indeed, specifically somebody close to me, and knew they were making pretty good money. I said, you know what? I never thought about sales. Was always discouraged from doing sales, but if it's gonna make money, why not give it a shot, right? So ended up going for it. Got the job. Very good job to come out of college with. Probably, very fortunate for that, right? Tech sales. Did well for about 5 years there. And just to correct you on the intro, DSP, real quick, I didn't get laid off from Indeed. I actually switched to an RPO in a brief stint. It's not on my LinkedIn right now.
Okay.
That one didn't work out. All good over here. I'm not going to talk about them, but that one didn't work out. But let me go back. So was at Indeed for 5 years, was selling for them recruitment advertising, right? That's mainly what you do. We also had a product where Indeed was trying to get into recruitment itself. It's called Indeed Hire. They would actually take a role and charge a 10% fee for like actually having an Indeed internal person fill a job as a recruiter would. Different thing, but I was very good at selling that, right? So I was very good at selling a recruitment type service and getting people to sign up for something like that. So then I thought, all right, I really want to try to go off on my own. Always had the entrepreneurial bug, but never knew what I really wanted to do. So I started looking into recruitment. And I found online different videos, scouring YouTube, going down the wormhole, and I came across a very popular name, rest his soul, Ben Nader, right? Came across Ben Nader's videos and ended up taking his training course and started my firm, my LLC on the side. So while I'm working at Indeed, I have this little thing I'm trying to build up, get used to it, right? Learn about recruitment, all the ins and outs. And first year I did everything wrong. So I started the firm 2022, was mass emailing, right? Thousands of emails going out to any which person, no niche, generalist, zero value offered, right?
Was that from
So
your band training, or was that before you took the training?
that was from the training, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And again, nothing against Ben, God rest his soul, but it just wasn't the right approach, at least how I wanted
it's meant for people that are in like warehouse roles and are making 30 grand a year and want to have a way of using the computer to make that or more from home,
Right.
That's the
Right.
model.
Yeah, that became pretty apparent. There was other, trainers and mentors I was looking at too, but I just felt I'll say this about Ben, what he was very, very helpful with was just overall like starting the LLC, right? Like, oh no, you got to get your DBA. You got to, find out your EIN number. You got to do all these things that I never did because I was never an entrepreneur. I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs, so I didn't know how any of that worked. So he was a great mentor with that, was always available. And so I got the foundation built, right? I got the website, got all the documentation, everything I needed. So I started doing that in 2022. Then I was trying to get clients. And for the first year, I did get a couple people, but they were just, one was like a telecommunications law firm. It was like 50 people in the country that actually did that. Couldn't find anybody. Another was a luxury coffee brand. That was interesting, but they had like 7 interview steps. So like that never worked out. So it was just a lot of trial and error, right? But the good thing was I didn't dive headfirst, and then like I was still had the base of my role at Indeed, right? So fast forward a little bit, I ended up getting approached by an RPO to go work for them. It was a much better base salary. It was attractive. And I said, you know what? I'm not ready to dive into recruitment full time yet. Indeed and tech was going through some weird stuff in 2023. So I said, you know what? Let me try to make this move. I'll see if that works. Lo and behold, a month later, after I leave Indeed, big layoff happens, about 15% of the workforce. So I dodged that bullet. But I got into this RPO, which was in healthcare recruitment, and did all right with that. It was a stepping stone, right? It wasn't something that I really wanted to do, which was do this business full time. So we fast forward a little bit into 2023. I'm working for this RPO. I also have this recruitment business on the side. I lucked out and I made 2 placements on the side. And the placements were for a steel service center. Now, granted, I knew nothing about steel, but I wanted to recruit sales positions. They needed salespeople for their flat roll distribution team. So I ended up doing that, and I made 2 placements on the side. I say, okay, this could work a little bit, but still not ready to go full time, right? Still had a lot to learn, still doing that. So all of a sudden, September rolls around, and I see the company having a little bit of financial issues. Things aren't going as they had anticipated. Probably overpaid me and a little bit of other people, if we're being true to ourselves too. And I got word after one deal went south that, hey, it's just not going to work out, man. We're going to have to let you go. No severance, no nothing. Granted, my wife is 32 weeks pregnant. So we have our baby in
great timing, man.
That's coming. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So that was on a Friday afternoon. I said, no warning, no nothing. All right. So then I'm like, okay, now I have a decision to make, right? Either you get another job or you actually take this fucking thing seriously and have the balls to do it, right? So I was thinking about it over the weekend. We ended up, it's, fall, big football fan. So my wife says, all right, let's cheer you up. Let's go to the supermarket. Let's get some groceries. We'll have a nice football Sunday, make some wings, all that stuff, right? So we ended up going there. And then all of a sudden, like as I'm thinking in my head, like, yeah, let me do this with the business. I'll give this a shot. I'll hit the ground running Monday. And all of a sudden, these girls come around and they're raising money for their church. And they say, hey, would you like to buy a poster? And I said, yeah, sure. Why not? What do you got? And the first thing that they pull up is a image of Jesus with his hand out, asking you to come over troubled water, right? Basically saying, and to me, that was a sign of, hey, trust me, you got this. It's going to be all right. So I'm like, all right, that's what I got to do. Next morning, 4 a.m. hits. I'm up. I'm on the laptop. I'm getting everything rolling, right? So now I'm head first in the business. I made the decision. I'm not going to work for somebody else. I'm not going to get laid off. I'm not going to put my faith and trust in another employer. I'm going to do this on my own. Ended up going at it full time since September 2023. I'll say this. I learned a lot in those first final months. My goal at that point was, let's just try to get one placement by January, right? If I could do that, I'm doing something right. We came close between splits, between certain NPCs that had worked out. But the problem was I wasn't niched down. I was still going after all sales positions because I did sales, right? I knew I wanted to recruit sales, but I was just going at anything sales. But there's tons of sales roles, right? There's steel, there's tech, there's healthcare,
It
there's
feels
whatever.
like a specialty at first, and then you realize it's still not.
And then you realize, wait, this candidate, I have nowhere else to send him, right? Nobody else, whatever. So that happened, right? So things fell through the cracks, didn't work out. So January comes around, I'm like, all right, that didn't work. But I learned that, I'm not too specialized in sales. I'm not specialized enough. But what did work for me, right? I ended up placing a role with a steel company. Now, I know nothing about steel, but what I did know was that I had people that didn't get that job that I had tried to place there. So I said, you know what? I built a little bit of a network for myself. Let me try to niche down further. And I ended up seeking out somebody in the Herd group. I'll shout out his name, Scott Tuttle. He's pretty vocal in the group as well. He helped mentor me a little bit, showed me some NPC strategies, some, agreements, not charging, below 20, 25%, right? So like, that's where I learned a little bit of the fundamentals, but his mentorship combined with the fact that I niched down into steel, which was small, but unsaturated, allowed me to really build a brand presence and ultimately start attracting business. And fast forward to today, we're on track to double what I did last year. Just had our first 6-figure month. Happy about that.
Excellent.
Thank you. And, would like to replicate that again. I just found out an offer got declined. So I'm a little bit not too happy coming on this podcast.
Who's
it's me. My wife helps out a little bit as well. So I say that, but always address the company as we. But so we had an offer fly south, but we are expecting some more in June. So it's becoming a lot more of a stable revenue business, even though it's direct placement, right? So I'm not doing staffing, I'm not doing contract. It's all permanent placement, direct hire. But building a brand helps, niching down helps, and just trying to.
And you talk about industry on LinkedIn too. You don't just talk about recruiting, and the positions you have open. Like I see that you talk about stuff in the steel industry. You started a podcast that's focused on the industry you recruit in. Like you went all in on this niching down. Yeah,
you have to, right? Because as recruiters, and I think you alluded to this, if this was in the intro, DSP, or maybe when we were talking, it's like so saturated out there, right? Like there's so many recruiters. So how do you differentiate yourself? And the differentiation isn't, we could find you talent that no one else can, or we use this AI platform. Nobody gives a shit about that. People give a shit about what matters to them. So if I'm following and with a ton of people in the steel industry, they want to hear about steel, right? Now it helps to throw out recruitment tips and talent tips. They want to hear that too. But if you're talking their language, they feel a lot more comfortable coming to you for help as opposed to this guy that just hunts a bunch of different sales roles,
Well, also, I think it also helps in the sense that, when you're niched down like that, and you talk about the industry a lot, when people think about recruiters in the steel industry, I mean, I don't know how many there are. I mean, you said it's not really, it's small,
handful.
But not
it's a
handful.
Yeah.
But do you feel like what you've done now with your branding, like when people think of a recruiter in the steel space, I mean, they kind of think of the recruiter for steel. You know what I mean? I mean, part of branding in a lot of ways is it also have that niche, but finding a new way to make it interesting, almost kind of entertaining. As well.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of cool, like a recruiter steel, for example. And I think that's a big part of being able to niche down because, not only can you talk about the industry, but also allows you to be in the industry full time to kind of develop the word of mouth and the branding and that omnipresence. Because when again, when people think of recruiter and steel, they think of you, right?
Yeah,
because you're fully deep in that industry, and that's really important. Well, let me ask you: Did you have any doubts going into steel? Like, did you think it might have been too small to support, your practice?
Yeah. So there's that, right? So you have to toe a fine line, right? Because certain industries are pretty small.
Yeah.
This is one where everybody kind of knows everybody too. So, there's a handful of recruiters that play in it. Some have been doing it a lot longer than I have. I don't feel like, and not to knock anybody or anything, I don't feel like anybody is going in as much on the branding side of things as I've done. And I think that's provided a little bit of a leg up, right? Because if you're not afraid to get on camera, if you're not afraid to interview somebody on a podcast, put yourself out there, go to every industry event, right? People are going to see you more. It's the idea of being seen more, right? Think of your favorite logos. One thing we always joke about, we live in the tri-state, Chris, you're familiar too. There's like a Verizon store on every single corner, right? It's a pizza shop, a gas station, a Verizon store. That's all we have in certain towns here.
Sbarro.
But my thing is Sbarro, Subway, right? But you always see them, so that brand becomes familiar. My thing was that, all right, if I'm whatever an industry I'm going to niche down, if it's steel, if it's whatever, I just want to be constantly being seen, right? So if it's LinkedIn, posting every day, right? If it's a conference, I want to try to get there as much as I can. If it's whatever, right? I just want to be seen as much as possible and build that brand presence. So as far as steel being small, it is. I've kind of branded myself as the recruiter of steel, but I'll touch anything in the metals industry. So it's not just like steel mills, it's distributors of aluminum and stainless, of red metals I could touch, right? It's stampers, which some of these distributors sell too, because they need to sell their product too as well. It could also be, fabricators, anything in the steel industry downstream, I'll touch.
You could go up and down the supply chain, the value chain there, right? And that makes sense. And it's easy to position to someone who's in that ecosystem, because you're not really deviating from your message. You're still steel focused. Yeah. They're just in that ecosystem.
Right. It could be a finished product. It could be, raw steel, right? But I'll still entertain it because it's still in that world,
Now, since it's small, you obviously have that challenge of who's going to be your source of your candidates, who are going to be your clients. So a little bit on that, and how diversified are you? Let's say with that 6-figure month you had, how many different clients does that represent? And what's been your approach there?
Yeah, good question. So I'll say this, from being diversified, it comes from multiple different clients, right? So it's not just one. My average fee, I try to keep around 25,000. That's typically where I charge 25%. Usually the roles are around 100K base, some more, some a little less. And that's where I try to stay. Now, the clients that I work with, I tend to go more for the smaller or medium size, even if they're giving me consistent roles, only because a lot of these larger companies, they do have internal TA teams, and I don't want to get strung along by that. I'd also want there to be a need there too. And also they're a great source of candidates, to be frank, right? So you have to pick and choose, and this is the value proposition that I give, right? You want me on your side rather than against you, because at the end of the day, that's the way it is, right?
Do you tell them that? That's an age-old sort of debate. Do you flat out share that with them? Or you hint
I allude to it. I'm not in your face being like, all right, well, if you're against me, I'm going to take your people. I'm not going to threaten you unless you've been an asshole. I haven't accounted that too much yet, but no, I just say, look, friend or foe. It is what it is.
The strategy makes sense too, because if you go after the small ones, it's a shorter path to the decision maker. They need the help more, but also if you are trying to consider who's going to be targets, who's not, that you're probably likely to draw people from the larger entities to the smaller ones. Like in most industries, you see that. They're like, you pull somebody away from the big faceless corporation where they're a number, come work for this smaller organization where you can make an impact, blah, blah, blah. So you have a greater quantity of possible targets to recruit in the bigger companies anyway. And there's a lot of bureaucratic red tape to hire for them. And you're just another commodity vendor to them. So that makes a lot of sense.
So think about this. If my value proposition is I bring you top sales talent in this industry, right? People at those large firms, they've had great training programs, but now they've been a few years in. There's a lot of bureaucratic red tape. They kind of know the ins and outs. They want some more flexibility, some more autonomy. They're also capped, because many of these big companies, they cap their commission. They're not earning unlimited commission. So they're not making what they could be making at this small, medium guy that just, hey, I'll pay you 20% of net profit. Right. So, that's kind of where I pull from. sure.
All right, so let's go back to when you started. It really dived into steel, right? How are you getting your first few clients? Because at this point, right, again, you did the branding thing and you're really well established, but then you weren't, right? So you were kind of scrapping from nothing, right? So what were your steps going into the steel industry or the metals industry broadly? What were your steps in terms of getting your first few clients as well as starting the branding journey? Because I think a lot of people look at your branding journey right now, like, man, that's really cool, but I can never do that. But obviously you start somewhere, right? You started when you had nothing. Same thing with the practice. You have a lot of steel clients before you had nothing. So how did you kind of start that process with getting clients and branding yourself? Like, how did that begin?
Yeah. So, like I said, the goal was to be the go-to guy
Yep.
in the industry, right? We all know Trump, president, right? What was he famous for? Putting his name, capital letters on all of his buildings, right? So you can't escape it. It's just everywhere. That's what I wanted to do in the steel industry. Build that type of brand where it's like, okay, this is my guy. So what's the steps to do that? So first of all, I had a client that I filled roles for, right? There were also candidates that didn't make the cut, but some of those that didn't make the cut weren't bad candidates. They just had different type of product experience. Okay, so maybe you don't sell hot rolled steel, but you were really good at selling stainless. Now I could take that candidate and I could bring that candidate to market to a distribution company of stainless product, right? And say, hey, got this great candidate, top performer at this company. Fortunately, wasn't able to place him because, this was a more carbon focused organization, but I think he'd be a great fit for you, right? And you start having those conversations. So that was my outbound approach, the MPC approach. I think that's the best thing you can do because there's value right there, right? You show the client or the potential client, hey, this guy has people that are good that I really can't get myself. I should talk to him, as opposed to just saying,
in sales, right? I mean, it becomes such
Yeah,
a great value prop, regardless of your fee. Yeah, it's 25 grand, but they'll bring X dollars. It's black and white. It makes the MPC. You always have to, pitch them as a made, saved, achieved, if you use that method, right? And they've made it and they've achieved it on the sales side, which is super cool.
Sure. No, absolutely. It's better than just asking for business. Hey, I see you have an opening. I'd love to help you or work with you. How do I know you can help me? That's the thing.
And that could work. I mean, and look, at the end of the day, man, when it comes to branding yourself, like there's like the NPCs are part of the cheat code to getting like to rapidly build like brand recognition and rapidly build value. I mean, you can do the same thing over a year, just reaching out to people because there's a lot of, been in this for a long time. Like, anybody who's been in the business for a long time knows that you can reach out to a company for months, years, and they never want to use you. They're not, or whatever their excuses are.
Yep.
And finally, eventually, best person quits and their recruiter they're using isn't really working out. Let me try this guy. He's been reaching out to me for years because there's certain value and consistency, right? But it's the NPCs that can really accelerate that like a lot. Yeah. That's why I'm a big believer in NPCs for sure.
Yeah. And another thing that could accelerate that is content and engagement, right? Mm-hmm. So even if they're not ready now, because recruitment is a timing game, if they see you every day in their feed, if they see you at the conference, if their colleagues are talking about you, right? Eventually, when they have that need, you're going to be the first person that they call. So that was the other, that was the other side of the coin, right? So you do the MPC thing. I always found that too, when I was at Indeed in sales, whenever I was in a sales slump, the best way to get out of it was just to have as many human conversations as possible. So what I mean by that is it's not just, hit 100 dials, right? Because what's a dial? Have a conversation that leads to something, right? Build a relationship and have as many of those in a day as possible. If your dials are 20, great. But if you have 15 great conversations, that's a freaking great day. So it was always, let's just have as many conversations as possible. So how did I do that? I ended up using a Dripify type tool. It's called Skylead, which was automating the LinkedIn connections and maxing those out every week, 100 accepted connections a week. And my sequence would be this. It would say, hey, Chris, my name's Tyler. I recruit top sales talent in the metals industry. Would love to connect and be a resource down the line, right? Down the line, meaning if you're not looking now, I don't care. I just want to be connected because I can help you in the future. All right, boom. You connect 2 days later. Appreciate the connection, Chris. Just curious, are you open to opportunities at the moment, right? In that sense, if you say no, but happy to connect, that's great. got you in my feed. We're connected. Free message if I ever have a role for you, right? But the other side of that coin is if you say yes, I'm still picking up the phone even if I don't have a job for you. Because the thought is, okay, I could take you to market, I can NPC you if you're really looking, or I just put you in my database, I have your resume, and then I can pull from you once I have the right opportunity that matches you. So that's what I just did. I had as many of those conversations as possible. I followed every single leader and company that I could find with the word steel and the word metal in it. And I engulfed my LinkedIn feed with all steel and metal stuff because now I can engage with it, A, and that pops up in everyone's feed. But B, it helps me learn more about the industry. Now I know what's going on a daily basis. I see the terms. I learn more each day. And then I just try to be as engaged as possible, content, all that.
Okay. There's a good point in there too about how you kind of curated your own feed, right? Because it's easy to, and I've had this happen to me, where you fall into a trap of you talk about recruiting, you post about recruiting, you connect to recruiters. Next thing your feed is nothing but freaking recruiting, and it's not about shit. Yeah. Right. So like, if you're in this like bubble, this little echo chamber of just people talking about recruiting and recruiters talking about recruiting and recruiters liking each other's recruiting posts, they're not learning shit. You don't know what's going on. So like, you can easily go down that rabbit hole, but intentionally curating your feed to be industry focused keeps you like in the know on the stuff. That's a good point.
That's why I changed the name of the podcast from when you did it, because originally I had it as Let's Talk Talent, because that time period was when I was going at everything and anything, right? So I said, all right, let me be an authority in recruitment, right? You go to this guy for recruitment and talent knowledge. But now that I've niched down into the steel world, I said, you know what? I don't just want it to be about recruitment, because the most interested people in recruitment are recruiters, not always your prospects, right? You want to talk their life. I said, you know what? Let's make this more industry focused. I can bring on people. Those could lead to business, right? That could lead to a potential client. I guess very much easier could lead to a client than anywhere else. And, it just helps build your authority in the space.
Because you talk about challenges in an industry too, it always comes back to people stuff, right? So you don't even have to make it about recruiting. And if you get them talking about it, it always comes back to people. And then they're like, oh, actually, while we're talking about that, Tyler, can you help me with this?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I will say this to the podcast. You mentioned before about reaching out to these folks, right? Ever open to opportunities, and I imagine you probably did that with leaders as well, right? Because it's a great way. If you want to talk to a leader, talk to them about their own career. Even if they're not on the market, they're more likely to talk to you, and then you can have a great conversation, which can lead to business or another NPC. But also for the podcast, I know I've got some clients that do podcasts as well for their business, and you can reach out to a high-level prospect for months and years and never get a reply. But say, hey, do you want to be in my podcast? I'll profile you and your leadership journey, how you got to where you're at. And that's the ego play.
Of course.
Now you got
people love to talk about this stuff.
Now you know what's funny?
Look at me right now talking about.
I've never done that on purpose here, but it happens. 3 of my clients right now, excluding Chris and Ben, from all of his podcasts, are people we had on the show.
Sure.
It's amazing. And same deal with you, Tyler. If you ever have need for temps, who are you going to think of? It's just
right.
It's
That's
great for everything.
Yeah, of course.
It is. And thing is too, like you don't have to be a master interviewer. You don't have to be great on camera. In fact, when you first start out, you're probably not going to be very good. Just do it anyway, and you'll get better. I imagine you're probably a lot better now than when you first started, right? You're a lot smoother, less awkward. I know. Same goes for me. When I first started doing video, I was super awkward. And then I got used to it and got into it. And then from there started to be able to be a lot more natural. But yeah, I mean, there's no reason why any recruiter can't start a podcast. It's really easy to start. So actually, let's dive into that actually in the time that we have left, because that's a great avenue, as we mentioned, for getting new clients and just building a name in the industry as well. So it's really kind of a two big benefits. How did you start it? How was the process of actually starting that podcast?
Interesting. Okay, so this is actually my 3rd podcast. So 3rd time's a charm. Initially, I started out with the American Dream podcast, where I was like, let me try to support this brand by showcasing people that made their dreams come true, right? And again, all over this. And then I decided, wait, I really wanted to serve my recruitment firm better. Let me make it called Let's Talk Talent. We just talk about recruitment. I host recruiters. And then I said, wait, hold on a second. I'm doing recruitment, and I like this Recruiter of Steel brand. That's pretty unique. Let me make it about that and host some industry professionals on there. So you're never going to get it right on the first try. But you don't need a lot to podcast, right? You get a hosting site like a Buzzsprout, does all the work for you. You get, I think it's Adobe Pro or whatever, and it's quick editing. I don't edit much. So the way I like to do it is kind of like the same way you do DSP, where it's very conversational.
Mm-hmm.
I went into the thought, and I think this is what's helped me with the podcast too. I always go into it saying it's not about me, it's about the guest, right? So let them talk, let them feel comfortable, build that rapport, exasperate some of the big moments and create a moment, right? So if they say something like, that's a huge thing, like, what? Like, and, create that moment for them. But yeah, I think you just learn as you go. You got to just do it. Whatever it is, if you're contemplating starting a recruitment business, contemplating starting a podcast, you got to dive in, because the best way to learn is on the job. So.
And you don't have to have done it already. I mean, you can reach out to prospects or hiring managers and tell them that you're starting a new podcast. It's not like you already have one in existence. It helps if you already have one. But yeah. I mean, like, people like to even help people out. And in fact, one quick little note here. So I had a client do this. I thought it was really, really clever. He had, I forget how many LinkedIn connections he had, like, I don't know, 20,000, let's just say, as an example. And he was in the insurance space, and he started his podcast. And what he said was, and it's actually interesting, where you're starting this podcast, and he was asking people to be on. And he said, once it's on, and we'll talk about your leadership journey, your recruitment philosophy, and how you got to where you're at, so you could be a mentor to junior people who are watching this, and yada, yada. But then he said, and this podcast can be broadcast to my network of over 20,000 insurance professionals. Just his LinkedIn network. You know what I mean? Which is true, but it makes it sound a lot bigger than it kind of really is. And so that was what we did. If you're brand new starting out, just take your connection and say, well, it's going to be broadcast to our network of X thousand, niche professionals or whatever, right? And that's how you did it, to make it seem kind of bigger. And of course, now he doesn't have to do that. But that's what he did at the time to kind of like, it's kind of a bit of gray area, to be honest with you. But, it worked out.
I think it's valid, because if you're posting clips from it, even if you're just posting the link to it, I mean, it's fair game for that audience to see. So, sure.
Oh, 100%. Well, now, with that said, I'd imagine you've gotten clients from the podcast, right?
Yes.
So far, that's excellent. That's excellent. So beyond the podcast, what are the things what are some of the things that people can do for branding wise? So either be LinkedIn or Facebook that you're on as well. But what are things would you suggest the recruiters watching this can start doing, if not a podcast, to start getting their name out there?
Yeah. So number one is create that ecosystem, like create that feed, like you mentioned, Chris, right? So you want to connect and automate your connections if you need to do this too, but connect with as many people in your niche as possible, because whoever you're connected with is going to see your content, right? So that's step one. Step two is post every day. Now, whether that's a text post, image, video, it really doesn't matter. You could also honestly mix it up, but keep it industry focused, right? The more knowledge you could show about your industry and how you're of value to that, the better. External factors like a podcast are great if you could do that. I would also say, something I'm trying to get into now is video. I'm partnered with a local videographer here in New York, and we did wrap up a video for a client down in Atlanta earlier this year, which went pretty well. And some of these companies, especially with manufacturing, big facilities, they want to show that off. You can incorporate media or video into it. That's great. And I would say, just again, try to be everywhere. Think of where your ICP is and meet them there. So if it's on TikTok, make a TikTok. If it's on LinkedIn, dominate LinkedIn. If it's, conferences, try to get to this. If you do a booth, great. If you can't, just bring yourself, right? Because something's better than nothing. So.
100%. Well, also what they would add in there as well is make it authentically yours. You see a lot of
Yes.
content out there that's generic. People using FAP GPT, uh, and they're basically and all the content kind of sounds the same. You can tell when you see like FAP GPT content up on your LinkedIn. And yes, I did mispronounce it on purpose on LinkedIn. So make it authentically yours. Doesn't have to be perfect, but long as it's authentically yours, and don't be afraid to be a little different. So like I'd imagine in your case, you probably use like a little bit of humor, probably a little polarizing. Recruiter steel is definitely a bit polarizing, right? It's not, it's, what I mean? So be different and be polarizing, and you'll get people to notice you. It's a big part of it. And just be authentic,
Yeah.
be fun.
Tyler, let me
real.
ask you this, and I know we're about to wrap up, but there's a question that someone posed, and I had the same one. They're asking what your guarantee period is, and they asked 3 months or 6 months. But my question is more on the sales side, where a lot of people don't know, is it's got a lot more higher turnover than your average, let's say ops person or executive or what have you. How do you deal with that when your job is really to find the person, not to keep them? And when people don't make it, or what are your clients? I'm sure they're all pushing for these guarantees. What do you do?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I do a 90-day guarantee on my contingency agreement. Now, if somebody wants to sign an exclusive, sometimes what I'll do is I'll extend it to 180 days, but between 3 months and 6 months, if they leave, it's only a 50% replacement. So I'll replace them at cost, right?
So what is the replacement? And let's say in day 40, how much?
I would replace the person. So if it was, a 30 grand fee, I'd replace them for 15.
So you would charge them half the fee. So it's not really a full guarantee. You still make your money. You're still going to be
after
guaranteed.
3 months. No, it's up after 3 months, and even 3 months is a little generous, to be honest with you, because you'll know in the first 30 days if somebody's a fluke or something. So no, it is a tight rope to walk. Like I say, we're not responsible for retention. We're responsible for recruitment. Retention is your problem, but at the same time, we want to feel good that we did provide them with a good service and a long-term fit, right? So unless they're in an event where somebody didn't work out in that guarantee period, and I haven't had it happen yet under the 90-day guarantee, I would sit down with the client and really examine why that didn't work out, right? I'd get a feel for the client, get a feel for the candidate, and then you have to make a decision. Do you still want to recruit for this person, or did you just have a bad candidate, right? That's really it.
Speaking of that, I have I've got I know a few people who do this, and I know this is not a come with the concept. I believe Greg Dortch, I believe, came with this concept of the 5-year guarantee. And for those recruiters who are about to have their heads explode, in essence, what the 5-year guarantee is, it's kind of like how you do, Tyler, where let's say the person quits in 5 years, which is pretty typical. People are going to move on. He gives them a 10% credit on the replacement because he wants to be locked in for that replacement. For when the
10% is reasonable, but they're not probably going to leave, especially in 5 years. So
10% discount, not a 10% fee. Right?
Correct.
So,
correct.
Correct.
So, like,
yeah. 10% off of like the 25 grand I would have charged you, right?
Yeah. So it'd be like $4,000 off a $40,000 fee in essence.
But that's smart, because then they're like, oh, well, why call another recruiter when we called these guys back a couple of years later and have them find the next person? That's smart. And
the way he does it, he uses his 5-year guarantee in his marketing, because it's a big bowling ball you're just thrown to the deep end of the pool. Big splash. Like people always ask him about it, and then he can explain whatnot. But yeah. So that's
not a bad move.
Yeah, that's it. And that, to give credit's due, I believe Greg Dortch came up with that system, if I remember correctly. But all right, guys. Well, I think it is about time for this show to turn into a pumpkin in just a few minutes. So let us wrap up here, Tyler. It was fantastic having you on, brother. Really fantastic to meet you and to have you on. What do you want to leave the audience with folks? Because you're in a unique position, right? You started agency recruiting with your own firm. It's only a couple of years ago, so you're fresh in, and you've already accomplished a lot more than a lot of these veterans have, right? So for the young folks watching now, or thinking about going to their own agency, or just to grow a practice of that they can call their own, what would you tell them?
If everybody's watching this, look behind DSP. There's a picture of Rocky. Have the Rocky mindset, right? It's not about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you get hit and keep moving forward, right? How much you can take. So That's the name of the game in recruitment. You got to keep moving forward. You got to get back up. It's a roller coaster of a business, right? There'll be a million things that happen in a day. Your morning could be terrible, and then your afternoon could be fantastic, right? Things change on a dime, but you got to keep your head down, do the right things, execute daily, and always get back up. And just trust in yourself, trust in God, and it'll work out.
Wise words, man. Wise words. Thank you very much, Tyler. And guys, for those folks who are watching, don't forget, if you want to get some recurring revenue in your life and get out of the feast and famine, go to backofficenow.com so you can learn how to start adding temporary services, contract staff, and whatever you want to call it to your practice. And then for me, if you guys want to join my AI challenge, the doors are opening tomorrow at 9 a.m. It's going to be at realdsp.me/challenge. Tyler, thank you very much. Oh, and I forgot, actually, one more thing. If you want to connect with Tyler, I totally forgot. My apologies. Find Tyler on LinkedIn. His slug on, or his little like a personalized slug is Tyler Rossi. So it's linkedin.com/in/Tyler Rossi. All right, Tyler, thank you very much, man. Pleasure to have you on, brother.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
And for all you watching, thank you all. And we will see you here soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.